Hi, my name is Fred Wheeler and I run the HowtoDandD YouTube channel, and this is a Lost Mine of Phandelver Dungeon Master tutorial. This is lesson 4, the Redbrand Hideout. Now, part and parcel of these classes, with being a focus that we deal with the location, so finding the Redbrand Hideout, we'll cover that. Role-playing important NPCs, that will be covered. The Redbrands, the Goblin, the Bugbears, the Monsters, Glasstaff, exploring the location, and defeating the monsters that populate it in whatever manner you decide, or should I say the players decide to do. There is always going to be explain how to find Redbrand hideouts, describe it, what non-player characters are important to worry about, which ones you don't need to worry about so much. There will also be a demonstration process. There is a reason why there is a whiteboard marker and a whiteboard, a very small one, but there is still one there, because I will actually demonstrate a lot of this as we go. And part and parcel of explaining and demonstrating for me is to also allow you an opportunity to participate. For those of you who want a bit of practice before you actually get started and run this for yourself with your own players. Now, I'm going to make it clear that there's a lot going on here and nothing that I say is set in concrete. These are just recommendations, nothing more. And if you don't like them, just ignore them. That would be my advice to you. You never need to feel like anything that I say is set in concrete. It is always a recommendation or a suggestion and has no more importance other than it's just apparently how I would probably go about doing it and nothing else, okay? So now that we've covered the basics of that, let's talk about, like, how do you find the Redbrand hideout? There's a lot of different ways you can do this. You could interrogate the Redbrand ruffians once the party has subdued one of them or more than one of the bandits. You'll find some information on what they know on page 19 to 20. So when you need to sort of divulge information, go to that page or those pages. They could talk to Grista in the Sleeping Giant Tap House. Now, she will have overheard its location from the Redbrands that frequent the establishment, and you will find that on page 18. Now, this is a leap of, I guess, a leap of faith, reading between the lines. But if you go into a tap house or a tavern and you have a lot of people who are talking, they're probably going to divulge stuff that they shouldn't, and who's going to overhear it but the tavern owner? So this is why I'm suggesting this as an option for you in terms of how to find the Redbrand hideout. That's if they ever get in there. Number 3, finding the secret entrance can be achieved by talking to Carp Elderleaf, which leads into area 8 where there is a crevasse, and you'll find that on page, information's probably scattered from about page 16 to 18 of the adventure. Also, Halia Thornton, the Guildmaster of Phandalin, the Phandalin Mining Exchange, actually knows the location of the front door entrance to the Redbrand hideout. She's taken an interest in the Redbrands, and if you'll find all that information on page 17, she's taken an interest in the Redbrands, would like to take them over and control them herself. So there's no way she would not know where they hang out. She would have a pretty good understanding of the hideout entrance. Maybe not the actual interior, but certainly how to get in. Harvin Wester might be able to guess at the location of the Redbrand's hideout, as he's a smart man. He's a coward, but he's still a smart man. And you'll find information on Harvin Wester on page 18 that sort of suggests that maybe he has some sort of understanding of this. Again, very much reading between the lines. And then the final possibility is the general features for the Redbrand hideout and area 1 of the cellar provide enough information to explain how to get to the hideout. So if they go to Tresendor Manor, from Tresendor Manor, it should be easy enough for them to find there is an entranceway into the Redbrand hideout. So those are probably the easiest ways to deal with getting them to that point. So let's go over the different locations bit by bit and give you a good understanding of essentially how you can run this adventure. I'm going to move this out of the way because it's now in the way. And I do apologize if my arm gets in the way. You let me know if it does. So we're going to start off with this location here. Okay, location 1. This is the cellar, location 1. My suggestion is when they get to this location, okay, there is a door that leads into it. And I would just read out or paraphrase the box text. It's up to you. And then make sure to ask players what they would like to do once you've read out the description of this location. The characters can sneak into the cellar with a stealth check. Now, it's only a DC 10 to avoid being detected by the Redbrand ruffians guarding in area 2, which is over here in the barracks. It would be a group check, and it only requires half of the player characters to be successful. So if you have 4 players and 2 of them get a stealth check score of 10 or more, then the whole group succeeds. And the reason is that those who are better at the task help those who are really, really poor at the task. That's the concept of the group check. If you don't like group checks, then don't use them. But I would recommend that it's probably a smarter way to go about it. Try to reward people for using teamwork rather than disadvantage them by having one person who just happens to be extremely poor at being stealthy. So now, why have I said that the stealth check DC is 10? Because the passive perception of the Redbrand ruffians is a 9. So if they are actually paying attention and listening out for trouble, the player characters have to. It's a contest. So it's actually a contest. So in this case, I've just set it as a DC 10, which is 1 above their passive perception, which was 9. Okay, just a different way of doing it. The player's characters don't have to sneak into the cellar to avoid being detected by the Redbrands, as it happens. What they do need to do is make sure they don't make too much noise. Like talking would probably be a problem, or moving barrels would be a problem. But if they don't do that, then they won't even need to make a stealth check, because that's just sort of how that part of the adventure is set up. There is a secret door in this location. It's situated over here. The secret door into the Redbrand Hideout is easy to medium in difficulty to find, but I'm going to suggest that you set the passive perception or active perception check at a DC 20, which is hard. It makes far more sense for a secret door, or if they stipulate that they are actually manipulating or feeling along the wall or pushing against the walls, I would give them automatic success if the player characters state that they are pushing on the walls searching for secret doors. And I know that seems a little bit odd. There is a time when actually we want to reward players for doing something interesting, like I'm going to try and turn all of the coat hooks, or pull on the coat hooks, or move all the books in the bookshelf to see if there's a secret door that opens up, rather than saying roll a dice roll. It's not as fun. It's not as interesting. It doesn't engage your players as much. You can ignore this. This is the easy way usually. Nowadays, people just roll a dice. But if they actually do participate in that way, I would just not worry about any kind of dice roll. Now, the door between the stairs at the ground floor, which is over here, this door here on the north wall, it's just a cupboard, okay? There's nothing in here whatsoever. It's empty. And so if you were wondering what was going on, that's what's going on. Here, over here is a very thin section of wall, but the players won't know that from this side. While they're in this room, they won't be aware of that, if that makes sense. So that is the cellar, which is area 1. So when we get to area 2, which is the barracks, this is the barracks over here. Again, when they open the door, just read out or paraphrase the box text and then ask the players what they want to do. But no matter what they decide to do, things are going to progress, as the adventure states. Everything that I'm trying to give you is stuff that is not necessarily in the adventure. I'm not trying to go over stuff that is already written down in the adventure. I'm trying to give you the stuff that isn't there, okay? The characters can sneak up to the barracks with a stealth check. Again, this will be a DC 10 to avoid being detected by the Redbrands that are guarding in area 2. Again, it's a group check, and only half the player characters need to be successful for it to work. There are 3 red brands in the barracks here. With one of them, one or possibly 2 of the red brands are sleeping or resting, not necessarily sleeping, but they may be just resting on their bed at any given time. And then 1 or more are going to be awake on sentry duty, playing cards or dice on the crates. That's probably what they would be getting up to. This is an environment where if a fight does break out, there's just not very much space to move around. Okay, so it's not going to be a good situation for the players or the red brands. But the reality is, depending what the players do, it could possibly happen that way. You wind up with a battle of attrition with a very, very focused point where everybody's trying to stand in a line with one person making melee attacks and everybody else trying to make ranged attacks while they stand behind them. The 3 dirty scarlet cloaks that are hanging from the bunks could be used to disguise the player characters as the same 3 red brand ruffians in the barracks. Now, they may already have some red cloaks from their encounter in Phandelver if they have decided to actually wear those and take them along, so they could use those if they wanted to. Here's the problem. You're now in a location where all the red brands probably know what each other look like. So if you show up wearing a red brand cloak and you haven't changed your facial features in some way, either to represent or imitate the look of the 4 red brands that were faced in Phandelver in the streets, or these 3, it's probably not going to work as a disguise. So they're going to have to alter their facial features in some way. Now, spells like Disguise Self, which you'll see on page 233 of the Player's Handbook, or Alter Self on page 211 of the Player's Handbook, or if they have a disguise kit, this is probably the one thing they're more likely to have access to, and you can see information on the disguise kit on page 154 of the Player's Handbook. But just wearing the red cloaks isn't going to be enough. But a bit of time spent, putting a bit of makeup on, adding a bit of facial hair when it's necessary, will make all the difference in disguising themselves as somebody else, specifically from the red brands that they have already either killed, defeated, and captured, or have fled in some way. So yeah, not enough to just put on some red cloaks. Using a disguise kit with a red cloak to deceive the red brands in the hideout is by far the smartest route. And how am we going to go about sort of figuring out what this is going to look like? Well, it requires a DC 20 deception check or a contest between their deception, the player character's deception, and the insight of the creatures or NPCs they face. Now, to actually use a disguise kit and actually put it together, allocate between 10 and 30 minutes to create the alteration to somebody's face. So for every 10 to 30 minutes, 10 minutes is a very quick job, 30 minutes is a better job, and that would be for an individual, just one individual. So if they've got multiple individuals, they may be better off to go with 10 minutes and get a quick job done and get everybody in the party disguised with their disguise kit. So that is area 2. Now, area 3 is a little different. I would say when we're coming to something like area 3, don't necessarily consider, what would I say? It's often viewed as a wasted space, an area that is utterly unnecessary to the entire adventure. And I can kind of understand why. Oh, by the way, for those of you who are wondering why I gave you a DC 20 deception check or talked about a contest between deception and insight when using the disguise kit, you'll find the information for that on page 81 of Xanathar's Guide to Everything, if you have that book, that is. The trapped hallway is area 3. And as you can see, it kind of looks like it doesn't necessarily need to be explored. And in many ways, it doesn't. But read out or paraphrase the box text when the players' characters come through the door. Then ask the players what they want to do. Now, there is a pit trap in this location. The pit trap being detected in Area 3 assumes that the player characters in the front of the marching order have to actively search for a trap. So we're actually talking about the first player character in the front of the marching order. They are the one who needs to do the searching for traps. Everybody else, it's not going to work unless they are standing abreast. So if you have two people going forward first and they're standing side by side, you could have up to two people making this check. Anybody standing behind them isn't going to notice the trap. Does that make sense? They have to actively search rather than relying on a passive perception. Unless, of course, you've decided that passive perception is a better opportunity to avoid them metagaming. When they make a perception check that is lower than their passive perception, the default practice, if you decide to use passive perception, is to fall back on the passive perception score so that they can't ever get lower than the passive perception score. I've talked about this before. But in any case, it really requires, don't let players assume that they are looking for traps. They actually have to state, we are looking for danger or traps or something like that. Now, if they fall in the pit, climbing out of the pit can be achieved with a rope. So if somebody has a rope or a grappling hook tied to a rope, it's not a difficult feat, even a climber's kit. The only time they're likely to require anything with a dice roll is if they don't have a rope and a grappling hook tied to it or a climber's kit, because it's not that deep. So no strength or athletics check. If they don't have those sort of things, well, we'll get into that. So climbing out of the pit without assistance from the other player characters, which would be ridiculous. Hopefully the rest of the party understand that. A strength athletics check is difficult because of the flat walls. It's been carved out so it is difficult to climb out of. So it's likely to be a DC 20 to 25, which is very difficult for their level, considering the players are probably level 2 or 3 when they face this location. Now, there is a dead end here. Now, I don't know if you can necessarily see where I'm pointing with my pen, but you're probably wondering what's the deal with this, right? The dead end to the south of the hallway has a thin wall section. This thin wall section can be broken down with a pick or a large hammer. It needs to be something that is designed to smash stone. So something like a bladed weapon, such as an axe, won't do it. A sword, it's not going to do it. You need to have something hard like a hammer, a war hammer, or even a standard sledgehammer. A pick of any kind would be fine. A maul is pretty much just a great huge club that would do it as well. And it needs to be made out of something that's not wood. It needs to be something that can actually smash through stone. This will allow them access to the top of the stairs in Area 1. And you're probably wondering, well, what was the point in doing that? Well, it now creates a quick exit. Should you require a quick exit, who might use this quick exit? Glasstaff might use this quick exit. You might have your monsters use this quick exit if they have the right kind of gear to break a hole in it. And your player characters may decide to use it as a quick exit if they are clever enough to realize they could do something like that. So that's Area 3. Moving on to Area 4, which I believe is the Tresendor Crypts over here. Just give me a second while I just have a drink of water. I'm getting quite dry. I can see nobody has any questions, so I'm covering the things that I need to, which is good. Okay, so Area 4, the Tresendor Crypts. So read out or paraphrase the box text and ask the players what they want to do when they come through this door over here. They're probably not going to come through these double doors, but the doors to the north, that door to the north, more than likely. The players' characters can't sneak into the Tresendor Crypts, or they certainly can't sneak past the skeletons waiting to ambush intruders with a stealth check. Now, why is this? Because they are propped up on the sarcophagi, on these coffins, these stone coffins. Now, It does mean potentially they can't sneak past them, but they could sneak up to the door potentially, provided they are being sneaky and stealthy leading up to the door. So it's potential. There's a potential to still sneak up to the location, but just not sneak past this location. The skeletons are here for a purpose. Now, the skeletons have most likely been created by Glasstaff or Iano Elbrick with the Animate Dead spell, even though the Evil Mage stat block doesn't indicate he can cast a 3rd level spell. I know it's really confusing because who else would have put them here in the first place? It's got to be Iano. So assume it's done by his Staff of Defense as a special skill that he only has, or just assume that he has access to higher level spells and he's used up all of those spells to manage these undead for the day. It's probably the easiest way to deal with that. The best strategy for the player characters that they can use on the skeletons is to attack them with bludgeoning weapons, such as a hammer, a maul, anything that does bludgeoning damage, because skeletons are vulnerable to crushing damage. One of the things that is required is they need to have either be wearing a Redbrand cloak for the skeletons to not come to life and try to attack them, or to have the password. Now, they may or may not have the access to the password. The adventure does discuss what that password is, so I won't go into that any further. Okay, now Area 5, which is the slave pens, an interesting location. This is over here. So when they come through this door here, read out and paraphrase the box text and then ask the players what they want to do. Again, if the Redbrand ruffians heard any kind of fighting in Area 4, in other words, there's a good chance that if there's a fight here, they will probably hear them. In fact, you probably don't need to do any kind of dice roll for the Redbrands. If there's a fight, they will probably know. The Tresendor Crypts, the setup as an ambush, basically it's set up as an ambush site, not just by the skeletons, but also by the Redbrands. Okay, so they're going to probably be either side of the door waiting, and they'll press themselves against the west wall to ensure that they can't be detected, okay, and be quiet. So that means that trying to look through a keyhole or listen at a door or look under the door or anything like that is probably not going to help the players' characters, because they've hidden themselves well enough and probably been given more than adequate time to do so. The Redbrand ruffians can make a stealth check if you decide that you want them to make a stealth check in this case. By all means do so. The calculation is a +2, the dexterity modifier. Add that to a 20-sided dice roll, and then it's a contest or contested by the player characters listening by the door with a passive perception score, if you want to use that, or an active perception check, whichever one you think is most appropriate. So it's going to look a little bit like this. So our stealth check, Redbrands. Whoops, let's get rid of that. I mean, I think at this point, most of the time, most people are pretty familiar with how a stealth check is made. Stealth. But I will do it anyway. So their modifiers 2. I grab let's get rid of these inches. I grab a little container. I get my 20-sided dice. I roll it. I got a 4. I roll very low, so I only get a 6. That's their stealth score for this check. Does that make sense? I certainly hope it is. Okay, so that's the maths behind it. Now, should the Redbrands, I will go back to where I was and continue explaining. Should the Redbrands on guard get into a fight, they will likely call out loudly for help after they surprise the party or once they can actually act, no matter how large the party of characters is. It's the most sensible thing for the Redbrands to do. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to draw attention, because there's a lot of distance between them and everybody else in this complex. So, but still have them call out. The Redbrand's best strategy is to surrender if the fight looks hopeless, which it could potentially become hopeless for them unless they get surprised. because there's just no escape route. From this point, they can't really go anywhere. There's no way to escape. Or they could, if you wanted to, if they get into the cells with the 3 captives, the woman and the 2 children, they could threaten Marina and her children, threaten their lives, for safe passage out of the chamber, or force the player characters to drop their weapons, which would be problematic for the player characters, but still an option for you as a dungeon master. There's a strong possibility that the captives will actually get killed during this fight, because it would not take very much for you to decide, oh, they hear a fight taking place, you decide to put them beside the door, that's fine, or they get into the cell and have their weapons all ready to kill the prisoners. Now, they don't know that whoever's coming is necessarily here to, or gives 2 hoots about the prisoners. So you don't. There's a couple of different ways you can look at doing this. You don't have to do it just one way. If the captives are saved, they have them provide as much information as possible to the player characters and offer the side quest Marina's Heirloom. Okay, you know what I'm talking about. It's in the adventure, part of the thing that we're going to do is going to use this side quest and this information for the mother to ask for the party to get the children to safety and herself, and potentially find out what happened to the body of her husband, which is actually in Area 8 in the crevasse. Otherwise, what will tend to happen is if you offer up a reward without them having an opportunity to have some way. Look, it's not difficult for the player characters to escort them out and then continue on their way. It's not going to be detrimental to them, frankly, in any way whatsoever. Okay, Area 6, which is the Armoury over here. Again, read out or paraphrase the box text. My suggestion to you is ask the players what they want to do. This is like the candy store. So consider the weapons on the racks to be in good order. Okay, in other words, good enough order that they could use them and they will not have any kind of penalty or disadvantage in using them. They will fetch up to half the listed price for these weapons that you'll find on page 149 of the Player's Handbook, which can be sold at the Lion Shield Costa. Now, the total would be, if they sold everything and didn't keep any of it, would be about 145 gold pieces worth of weapons. That is half the price of the actual value. Yes, I sat down and I calculated it for you. The weapons in the armory could also be used by the player characters if they wanted to, and or gifted to somebody else. It's up to you, or up to the players, really. The red cloaks can be used to help disguise more of the party members, because there are some more red cloaks in here, if they have suitable spells and the Redbrand face to copy, because it's part of the disguise is you need to copy the face as well. Okay, otherwise other Redbrands will notice them. Will somebody like the bugbears notice a facial a different Redbrand walking through? If the player characters encounter the bugbears, or not so much the Northic because it's complicated, but glasstaff would certainly know who all the Redbrands are, but the bugbears might not be quite so sure. If they were wearing a red cloak, that might be enough. Even the goblin would probably not necessarily know who they are, so disguising themselves from them is a little bit easier. Okay, Area 7, which is over here. This is a complicated little area. It is really where it allows you to get to one half of the entire complex. So when they get to about here and they see in, read out or paraphrase the box text, ask the players what they want to do. The secret door in this area, or all of the secret doors in this area, are easy to medium difficulty to find. So there's a secret door, I believe, just here, and a secret door over here. Okay. I am not a fan of setting really easy to medium difficulty secret doors. It is up to you whether you decide to change them or not. But I would suggest setting the passive perception or active perception check, whichever you decide to use, at 20 hard, And again, give automatic success with no dice roll to any player character who states that they push on the walls in the right place. So if they're pushing a lot up against the walls and trying to manipulate the walls in some way, then they find the secret doors and they open for them. And don't even worry about having an investigation check. I know a lot of people like, okay, so they make a perception check, they get that, they find and notice that there's some sort of crack here, and then they've got to make an investigation check to figure out how to open the door. Yes, you can do it that way, but you don't have to. Okay. The beaver pellets are probably part of a stolen caravan belonging to Barthen Provisions. So consider awarding about 60 experience points for returning the beaver pellets to Barthen's Provisions, or they could just keep them. Now, why have I said 60 experience points? Because it doesn't say anything in the adventure about that. Have a look at the gold value of the beaver pellets. In past editions of Dungeons and Dragons, every piece of gold was worth 1 experience point. So you can see what I've done. I've taken the gold value and just transitioned it over to experience points. Because if they decide to take them back and they take them back to the right person, I think it seems perfectly reasonable that they be able to get experience points. Now, if they decide to try to sell them to somebody like Barthen's Provisions and they're their own beaver pelts, I'm going to let you decide how you to make that work. The box text describes hammers, pry bars, and nails. So I recommend deciding how many of each is available to the player characters to add to their inventory. Often you'll find in these sections a description of something, okay, you find in the description, but there's no other information. Really, this is your opportunity as a dungeon master to take the reins and make some decisions yourself. Okay, let's have a drink of water and I'll continue. We are moving along reasonably well so far. Okay, so the crevasse. This is this whole area here. It's quite a large complex. Sorry, stay there, Norfolk. And there's a lot going on here. Frankly, I would say to you that you're going to find this more fun than the players do. Okay, so whether they enter from over here or whether they enter from the secret entrance, read out or paraphrase the box text, ask the players what they want to do. Again, this location is a juncture point. It is a crossroads for the whole of the Redbrand Hideout with 5 different routes to be taken, which makes it quite complicated. So if they come through here, they can go, there's an entrance here, there's a pathway here, there's a pathway over there, there's another one here, and there's another pathway over here if they find that secret door, and another one over here if they find that secret door. So there's a lot of different routes that they can take. Those bridges are really what are holding them up, but not necessarily for every single route they decide to make. Now, the Norfolk is insane, but could still be bribed with food or the body of a Redbrand bandit who is dead to form a truce. The Norfolk has already formed truces before, so it's not unheard of. The Norfolk can provide all information on the Redbrand Hideout and the Redbrands, all secret information on the hideout. Anything that the Redbrands have thought of, it can be aware of and tell the players if it wanted to. It can tell them anything about glasstaff because the Norfolk will have read the mind of Yano or glasstaff. And it can also offer some or all of the contents of the hidden chest of treasure that it has to the player characters as a bargaining chip for its life or whatever you decide might be useful. The player characters attempting to persuade, intimidate, or deceive the Norfolk in any way is possible. It's absolutely possible and generally doesn't require a dice check. And I'll explain to you why. Because the Norfolk will play along when dealing with a group of individuals to stay alive. So no matter what they say or do, even though the Norfolk will probably not believe them if they're deceiving them because it can read their mind, it will just play along with them completely. It will seem like it's a friend or at least not a hostile creature, just insane. Okay, so play it insane, just not hostile. Why does the south trapped bridge only require an investigation check and not a perception check first? I know that's probably one of your questions. This is because characters have to get very close to the bridge and examine it carefully to notice the rigged wooden planks. If they're not standing like literally on that square, so I'll put a miniature there. If not virtually standing right beside it, they would not notice that the bridge has been rigged to collapse. Okay. The adventurer is stating that the south bridge trap triggers, or if a creature weighing more than 50 pounds. Look, here's what I would do to you. It already states that 50 pounds or more will trigger the trap for an adventurer if they don't notice it. The problem with 50 pounds is this means that everyone is going to be triggering this trap. There's not a single creature or character that you would have in a game, unless they're playing like a pixie and flying, or having a flying character, that isn't going to trigger this thing. If the flying creature flies over the top, then it's a bit different. But even a small creature with a pack or light armor is going to be weighing enough to trigger this trap, because 50 pounds is just not very much. Now, if you don't believe me, turn to page 121 of the Player's Handbook, and it will give you some base weights for the different races. And on top of that, there's information in there, and you just look at the calculation. I've done the calculation for you, so you don't have to worry about doing that. Okay, so that's my advice with regard to Area 8. Area 9 is the guard barracks. Now, the guard barracks is over here. Hopefully you can see this. When they open the store, read out or paraphrase the box text as normal. Ask the players what they want to do. In any case, no matter what they do, there's probably going to be a battle here. This is potentially the toughest combat encounter in the whole location, because the three bugbears with their brute and surprise attack traits make them incredibly deadly. So if they get surprised because they hear the player's characters coming, or they get a chance to actually swing and attack because they get a good initiative compared to the rest of the player characters, they can hurt the group very, very quickly. And they're probably one of the more fearsome monsters in this location. I'm not saying that you need to tone them down. Like, I am just warning you that they potentially, with surprise and their brute ability, would make a mess of the party. Players' characters tricking the bugbears is the optimal strategy if they have the red cloaks and are convincing. They do not need to disguise their faces, as I said. Knocking out a bugbear and holding them captive will provide additional information on Clarg, King Groll, and the Black Spider. And I would suggest that you can take much of that information from other areas of the adventure. They won't just know the information that is listed as what the Redbrands know in that section. They will know additional information, because remember, they are aware of Clarg and Cragmore Hideout. They are aware of King Groll. This means that you can definitely get the location of Cragmore Castle from them, and potentially, up to you, but they may not know everything about the Black Spider, but they can know additional information, and it's up to you. You make that up. You decide what is appropriate. There is a little goblin in here, which has become extremely popular in this adventure, and I highly recommend that you play this goblin the way that they have instructed. Droop is a cowardly goblin and is potentially a major ally for the player characters if they treat him well and don't force him into servitude. If they don't treat him well, he's going to try to run away. It's as simple as that. He's not a fighter, which is why when the fight breaks out and the player characters show up, he's just going to faint on the floor. If one of the player characters decides to just slit his throat while he's on the ground, which does happen, so be it. Moving on. So much for having Droop as an ongoing NPC. It is probably the one character in this whole place that can wind up traveling with a party for the rest of your campaign. It has happened to me. It's happened to so many other people. And playing Droop as a non-combat entity because he doesn't like to fight, but he will do other things. He is like the perfect follower, provided the players aren't dicks about things. If they are, then he's not going to be very useful, and he's going to make a run for it as soon as he can. Okay. Right, area 10, which is over here. I'm going to just have another drink of water because I'm going to lose my voice. We're getting closer, people. Okay, so when they open this door or they open that door, there's two different entrance ways. They could take either one. It doesn't matter. Read out or paraphrase the box text. Ask the players what they would like to do, but in any case, things are going to develop pretty quickly. Consider the 4 Redbrand ruffians as drunk if a fight occurs. Based on the information already in the adventure, I would suggest that they are drunk, which means they have been poisoned by the alcohol, which means they will have disadvantage on attack rolls. So I would check page 292 of the player's handbook to look up what happens when you get poisoned and how that works. I figured that out for you. This will make this battle significantly easier for your player characters and significantly more entertaining for yourself as you run it. Any attempt by the player characters to persuade, intimidate, or deceive the bandits is very likely to succeed. Why? Because they are drunk and will also have disadvantage on ability and skill checks. So as soon as the player characters try to make a persuasion check, if you're using that, or an intimidation check, or a deception check, versus their an insight check as a contest, they roll with disadvantage, which means they have to roll 2 20-sided dice and take the lowest result. Okay, that's not great. It means the chances are, if you're using numbers, it's going to work really well. Even if you decide that it's not appropriate to roll dice in this case, but players can still persuade, intimidate, and deceive them. If they do a good job of it, just let them get it. The chances are these Redbrands aren't that smart, and certainly once they've been alcoholed up a bit, their senses and their judgment is probably significantly impaired. If there is a fight, at least one of the Redbrands will try to disengage from the battle to warn Glasstaff and try to flee through either door, depending on which one is going to cause the least amount of problems for them, using the best route possible. They'll leave the common room and go and find Glasstaff and let him know that there is trouble. If the Redbrand ruffians aren't treated as drunk or poisoned, then the party of characters is likely to get, they're going to get decimated, particularly if they're new players. If they're not really familiar with the game system, 4 Redbrands can be a problem. 4 Redbrands in the street can be taken out by 2 player characters. But it's a slightly different environment. I would say there's always the potential. What I've discovered is this room here, room 10, the common room, and the area with the bugbears. These are the 2 areas that seem to cause the most trouble for people. Again, there is the potential that won't happen at all. As we've discovered, CR rating doesn't necessarily work that well. Okay, area 11, which is over here. So when they enter here through this door, or through this door, depending on which route they wind up taking, because you can come in the back route and take out Glasstaff and avoid all of this. Read out and paraphrase the box text. Ask the players what they would like to do. I recommend having the rat familiar hiding in the wizard's workshop if it hears, smells, or sees the player's characters coming, so it can spy for Glasstaff. That might be my recommendation. Consider using a skill contest with the rat's passive perception of 10 against the stealth check of player characters when they are outside of the room by the door, if the player characters are sneaking around. If they're not sneaking around, now because of that keen smell trait. I think it's the keen smell trait. Keen smell trait. See page 309 of the player's handbook. Now I'm trying to remember what this is. I believe that the rat has a smell trait. So that means that even if the the rat can't see them and can't hear them, it can potentially smell them. This is why I'm suggesting using a passive check for the rat no matter what, just because its senses are far more in tune. In the past, unless a creature has some sort of something going on that they can work with, I wouldn't bother. But in this case, it's a rat, and animals have usually got a very good sense of smell. Next, actually, I'm going to just change my notes there because it just occurred to me. Oh, and I've just moved my camera. That's not hugely helpful. We're going to check it and make sure I haven't balls things up too badly. Okay, so I knocked the camera, but I didn't take it out. Well, thank God for that. Okay, so moving through this area, giving you the rest of the information that you'll need. Hopefully that was clear. Glasstaff could be encountered in his workshop. He doesn't necessarily have to be in his quarters, if you prefer, because the mage does use the workroom, okay? There's a lot of information and stuff in this room, but you're going to need to define what the player characters can find and take, because it's not really clear by this section. There is a bit of text, a box text that sort of describes a lot of stuff, but it doesn't spell out in detail exactly what is there, right? So my suggestion to you is possibly add an alchemist kit that they can find in this location, or a herbalism kit, or both. Maybe a few book titles, make up some book titles. Players always look at a bookshelf and it will ask you, what are the names of the book titles? What's the title of these books? So make some up in advance. Some albics, is it alembics? It basically retorts, scroll cases, or a scroll case. An hourglass would be suitable in this location. Ink pot, ink pens or quills, some empty vials, a component pouch for a wizard, makes sense here, an abacus, etc. You could add other things. I've given you a couple of ideas based on the location and what they described. I've sort of added what I thought would make the most sense. You can see page 150 to 154 of the player's handbook, and it will sort of give you the information on those items. And you can decide if you want to add them in there or not. But it's nice to be able to add some stuff for people to pick up that is not a magic item, but is just mundane. Okay. Area 12, we're getting there. When they either come through the secret door or the main door, which hopefully that's the door they'll come through, which is no guarantee it will happen, read out or paraphrase the box text and ask the player characters what they would like to do. There's no mention of Glasstaff's spellbook, okay? So make sure to include it and note the spells that are in his spellbook. Now, the spells that should be in his spellbook are Charm Person, Magic Missile, Hold Person, Misty Step, and Animate Dead, because who actually animated these skeletons? It's probably him, even though it doesn't indicate on the stat block that he should be able to cast a level 3 spell. And then I want you to add some more spells. Spells that you would like your player characters, if you've got a wizard in the party, that you would like them to be able to have access at a later date when they can scribe them in. Now, you could say, okay, I'm only going to put in additional spells from level 1 to 2. But wizards can have a lot of spells in their spell book, even if they can only prepare a few spells. Okay? But I'm going to suggest that you include spells of level 1 to 4. And why is that? Because it makes sense that this wizard should be able to cast a level 4 spell, because to get 3 undead skeletons moving around, you need to have access to a level 4 slot. It just doesn't make sense. If you only cast Animate Dead at level 3, you can only animate 1 skeleton. You have to cast it at level 4, a higher level than its normal state. Otherwise, you can't have 3. So he must be able to cast level 4 spells. Now, why is he not casting level 4 spells in your battle? Because he's already used them all up. And he's already used all of his level 3 spells up. And he's only got level 1 and level 2 slots left. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Ensure that Glasstaff already has his mage armor cast on him. It lasts 8 hours. It makes no sense that he would not do it at the beginning of the day. Before the party arrives. Now he's going to use his staff of defense and consider his armor class to be 15, which is 13 plus 2, which is the calculation you would make for this character. Okay, so armor class 15. There is a back entrance to Glasstaff's quarters, which is over here. Okay, there, sorry, right there. That can be accessed by 2 secret doors. There's one at the bottom of the stairs and one at the top of the stairs on this wall here. It's pretty clear on the adventure book and the map. It's pretty easy. These doors are easy to find with a DC 10, and I suggest altering them to DC 20, as I always do, unless you want Iano or Glasstaff to be surprised if they come through the back door and defeated in less than 1 round, which has happened to me. And has happened to many other people, and it will be very anticlimactic as a battle or combat. It is entirely possible that you won't even get to the bottom of your initiative order because he's already dead, particularly if he gets surprised and the dungeon master rolls really low on that initiative. It's just one of those things. Glasstaff can have hench people to protect him. It's going to make the final confrontation with him much more exciting if you use, say, a few Redbrand ruffians or even some bugbears. I'm going to suggest ruffians are a better idea. He may have some guards that are guarding him in that room or are currently in that room because they've been warned that there is trouble in the place, because there's interlopers making their way through there, dispatching individuals as they go, or either doing something else. Glasstaff will potentially need to cast the shield spell from his staff every single round. It's a reaction, so make sure to do it. Don't forget to use the reaction spell shield. You're going to need it. And you need to improve his armor class during the fight. Otherwise, he's going to be dead. If he uses shield, instead of his armor class being 15, it will be 20. And you're going to need that, otherwise one dead mage. The intention of the designers is for the encounter with Iano to be a dialogue with the player characters. That is either negotiation, intimidation, or deception from all involved, not just the player characters, but also from Iano. Okay, so focus on the social interaction aspect if you can, but there's no guarantee that that's going to work because there are other people at the table, not just you. Don't be surprised if the player characters just attack and kill Glasstaff before any words are spoken, because it happens. It's happened to me. It's happened to other people. And what's the consequence of that happening? It's no skin off your nose. They just get less information. They will have to rummage through the room and find out as much as they can from what has been left behind, because they can't ask Glasstaff. Well, they may be able to get a lot of that information from the Northic if they wanted to, provided the Northic isn't dead and is cooperating. So quite a lot of stuff to actually take on board. There is some additional information. I know I'm taking a long time. There's some additional notes that I would like to sort of discuss with you before I leave you to ask your questions. And primarily because most of the things that you wind up encountering in this adventure, they are things that most dungeon masters have to deal with all the time. So something like role-playing Droop, you'll find the information on page 24 of the adventure, and you will also find a video on my YouTube channel, HowtoDandD, on how to play this character. The only thing you really need to know, though, is he is a harmless coward. That's it. If you remember those 2 words, harmless coward for Droop, you've got pretty much everything you need. Role-playing Iano or Glasstaff, you'll find the information on page 25 and 26, and you will also find a video on my YouTube channel, HowtoDandD, describes how to use him and how he would act. He is basically 2 words to sum him up. He's an arrogant noble. He's a noble individual. He's got a noble background of some kind, but he's very, very arrogant, and he's getting up to mischief. So what about role-playing the Redbrand ruffians? You'll find the information on page 19 to 22 and page 24 to 25. You'll also find a video on my channel. And as I've said before, just play them like baddies in a Western at the Redbrands. What the Redbrands know, if captured or interrogated by the player characters, can include details of the hideout that are not listed on page 20. Okay, I know page 20 does say what the Redbrands know, but the Redbrands can know a lot of the details and information about the layout of this location. And so by all means, give that information if you feel that the players have done a good job interrogating them. Dealing with the aftermath of defeating Glasstaff and the Redbrands, by now the player characters should have enough information to find Cragmore Castle or Wave Echo Cave. Otherwise, if they don't have either of those and you're worried that they don't know what to do next, feed the player characters a side quest from some of the NPCs in Phandelver to move them forward towards the final goal, and hopefully take them to the Black Spider. That would be my suggestion to you. So how do you do this? There are a number of side quests. You drop the side quest and you incorporate some information that will point them in the direction they need to eventually go if they've missed things along the way. Because sometimes players kill everything and they ask no questions. They've got nobody to ask questions of, and they just miss everything. Sometimes you have to put a great huge breadcrumb the size of a car in front of them. Harbin Wester only incarcerates Iano and the Redbrands if they are captured or killed. So they have to capture all of them or kill all of them. Any of those is fine. If they flee, it's much harder for Harbin Wester to know if he's going to be safe or not. So he doesn't want to do it. There is the potential for further rewards for the player characters from the townsfolk in the form of food, services, and favors rather than money. Because remember, they've already been extorted by the Redbrands. They've already had to pay protection money. They probably don't have a lot of money. Cellar Hallwinter might also be in a position to offer additional rewards to the player characters through the Lord's Alliance. The Lord's Alliance is a big faction. It's part of the major cities and pretty much all of the Sword Coast. So they could get some rewards from Neverwinter or Waterdeep from the Lord's Alliance if you wanted to do something like that through Cellar Hallwinter. Now, the treasure. There is a lot of barrels and crates full of goods, which you may have noticed, that belong to potentially Barthen's Provisions or the Lion Shield Costa. These are probably all stolen or taken. The estimated value I've calculated at 300 gold pieces. It is not listed in the adventure. I did a calculation based on the number of crates and barrels, and compared that with Cragmore Hideout and figured out what the value of those goods were for you. Returning the food goods could earn the player characters between 100 and 150 experience points as a reward, or you could decide to award them, and if they're not asking for money and they just return it, you could award them 300 experience points, the gold value of those goods, as experience points, because I'm utilizing an old mechanic from older versions of Dungeons and Dragons. Don't award them experience points if they're going to try to get gold out of somebody, though. Awarding experience points, as mentioned in the adventure, even if the monsters or NPCs aren't defeated in combat, they just have to overcome the monsters by guile, by force, by forcing them to flee, or getting them to surrender. If they manage to trick them or use guile of any kind, or persuade them, or force them to flee, or they surrender, you still give them full experience points. If you are using milestone character advancement, give the player characters another level for defeating the Redbrands and dealing with Iano Elbrick, whether they have killed them, driven them off, or they have surrendered, okay, and knocked them out.